Welcome to Total Retail Talks, your podcast channel for retail knowledge.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 104 of Total Retail Talks. In today's episode, executive editor of Total Retail Joe Keenan sits down with Peter Francis, Vice President of Digital Growth at T-Mobile, at this year's Seattle Total Retail Roundtable. Listen in as they discuss investments in brick-and-mortar and omnichannel operations. And now, on to the show.
So T-Mobile is kind of aggressively growing its retail presence, which is kind of counter to what is happening in the industry right now. So can you talk about that decision, about why brick-and-mortar is such a vital part of T-Mobile's future, and kind of how you're going to position your stores as part of that shopping experience with the brand?
Yeah, great question, Joe. First of all, I think the stories about the death of retail are greatly exaggerated, right? You hear a lot about store closings, yet when I would go through like strip malls and try to find retail locations to start up dark stores or to start up pickup locations or even to house my team, it's incredibly hard to find commercial real estate in places that matter. And I think that the important question when you hear about stories about the death of retail, particularly for us in the industry, are to talk about, or to think about what are the categories that are dying, right? So my last job was at Amazon, and I was hired into T-Mobile to go disrupt the way that we do e-commerce and we do direct selling, right? So at its heart, it's sort of an easy problem, right? You think about it and say, hey, people love mobile phones, people love buying stuff online. We should be able to get people buying mobile phones online, and that was the theory, right? And it turns out that people didn't, and I didn't explode the category. I didn't double our business year over year. And I did what any good marketer would do. I did some consumer research. So we went out, talked to 6,000 people, very large sample quantitative study. We kind of asked them, like, how do you make your choices about where you go to purchase? So it was a channel strategy study. And something really, really interesting emerged. It turns out that there are two most important dimensions that people choose when making a decision about where to shop. One dimension is how complex is the product that I'm shopping for? And two, how important is the product that I'm shopping for to my life, right? So if it's not very important to my life and it's not very complex, it's a product I understand, like gum. It's basically just taste. I'll take a chance. I'm standing in line at the grocery store and I'll buy a pack of gum. If it is not very important to my life, but it's complex and I don't understand it, like a connected TV, I'll read a CNET review. So it's a little bit more complicated. I might do a little bit of research, but then I'll read a CNET review and then buy whatever the top reviewed product is, or go onto Amazon and buy the top reviewed product. Things get really interesting when you move into a different category, which is the stuff that people really care about. And in that category, like, where should I live? I'm planning to move to San Francisco and I want to rent. So where should I rent? And it turns out in this category, people don't trust anonymous experts. It's a very simple category. Everyone gets it. It's about safety and quality of life. So it's not that the product is complex, but the product's important to me. And it turns out people ask friends and family. Word of mouth becomes critical. In the upper right quadrant, stuff that's really complex, I don't get it. And it's really important to me. Financial services, life insurance. These things, people always want to ask an expert because they don't even trust their friends and family. And that turned into a massive aha moment for us, which is there is no way we're going to be able to disintermediate the expert, the human touch, from the equation of buying wireless, because wireless has moved on. It's not the 1980s anymore. You don't buy a car phone to stick in your car. Like, it's important to you. For many people, frequently, it's the only wireline connection that they have because they've gotten rid of the phone connection at home. For many people in the subprime category, that connection to the mobile internet is the only internet connection that they have. So this has turned into a massive, complicated, really important product for them. And the investment in stores made sense. So at a time when everybody else is shrinking, the importance of wireless is rising, the complexity of wireless is rising, and we're investing in retail stores.
Yeah. So we're going to get back to that kind of the complexity of the product and the in-store experience. With the growth of the business and sort of reinvesting in brick and mortar, kind of leads to a discussion of omnichannel, which is everyone is familiar with. So I'm just interested in kind of what does that mean for T-Mobile, and then kind of thoughts on how you execute that omnichannel strategy that, you know, is kind of the vision that I think all retailers try to strive to, but I guess easier said than done. Mm-hmm. So what are you guys doing at T-Mobile?
Mm-hmm. Great question, Joe. You know, I think every time I hear the word omnichannel, it's funny, in being in the digital marketing business, right? When you hear omnichannel, sometimes if you're in the wrong conference, they say, oh yes, omnichannel. You want to buy your paid search and your display at the same place, right? It's like, no, actually, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about fulfillment, right? And omnichannel connection for us, the way that we've parsed it out as we think about our IT roadmap, I always ask about HIT, human identity, across channels going between digital and brick and mortar. Can you at least recognize this human being when they show up in the store? Because I sent you a cookie, because I sent you an appointment ID. Can you do that and at least say, oh yeah, Joe, thanks. We know we talked to you on the website yesterday. That's the bare minimum. That's step one of omnichannel. HIT, step two. Can I transfer your intent? You're Joe and you wanted to buy an iPhone from us and you have less than stellar credit. That would be step two. Because that requires that I not only send identity, but I also send some intent information with us. By the way, this is the step that could enable reserve online, pickup in store. And the third part of HIT is the transaction itself. Can you buy online and pick up in store, which means that I've taken your method of payment potentially. I've almost completed the order, and it's only fulfillment that's going on in the last step. And that's a really important transition path for us. So where we've started from the fundamentals. We want to make sure we've got really clean data around customer identity, because any of you who've worked sort of in the marketing business, customer identity gets really hard. Who's shopping? Do I have PII? Can I go transition that PII across channels? And if you happen to have a large retail store base, you know that point of sale system does not talk well with web systems, right? There's enough and more like large brands here in the room. It's a struggle because you've started out, you've put all of your marketing data into a web-first system that doesn't necessarily speak well with retail. That's where we've started. We're moving very aggressively into passing intent across the board, and we're trying to figure out where do customers care, because in everything that we do, we're not doing technology for its own sake. We're trying to do things that customers care about, and we're trying to figure out the right balance for buy online, pick up in store.
So the complexity of the product, in-store experience, obviously then kind of the other part of that equation is then you need really strong sales associates to give the kind of, that personalized service, but also knowledgeable of the product, knowledgeable of the... So can you talk about what you're doing at T-Mobile to ensure that in-touch, in-store experience is kind of the same level of service that consumers have now come to expect online?
Yeah, great question. It's funny, I was chatting with the lady from Seattle Coffee Gear here, and Seattle Coffee Gear is a great brand, right? It's a small brand, but the depth of expertise around buying coffee and coffee equipment, the processes and the ceremonies around preparing a good cup of coffee, those things are hard. And it turns out that finding an expert who can reflect that, both in terms of depth of knowledge as well as passion, it is really hard to encode that. You can try to turn that into a knowledge base article, you can try and turn that into a video, but there's nothing for the sell process because selling is so human. And being immersed in that environment, watching the rep do their thing. And I can tell you, I've bought a lot of coffee equipment out of Seattle Coffee Gear, principally because I was standing in the store and being immersed in that experience and watching the frontline associate in front of me go through that process and tell me about the best sort of gear. And that's something that we at T-Mobile came to realization about 6 years ago. Our biggest asset is our frontline. We've got about 20,000 representatives in stores across the country. We've got 3,000 points of presence. We've got another 20,000 representatives in our call centers. These guys live and bleed Magenta. There's nothing that we can do better on the digital space than to go enable a true one-on-one connection between our customers and the frontline. And that's almost everything that we do. So that realization actually turned into our underlying philosophy for digital, and we call it human digital, which is connecting our frontline and the digital customer as close together as possible.
You mentioned call center, which is a good segue to the next question, is telesales, which is another channel that you're bullish on at T-Mobile. Can you talk about kind of the growth in that business, that area of the business that you've seen, and kind of why you're investing and believe that can be continue to be a growth engine for the company?
Yeah, telesales was just a complete surprise to me. I'd never done telesales before in my life. When you think of telesales, you think of like some scene out of a bad 1980s sitcom where a guy's trying to sell you like a Ginsu knife, right? And it turns out that there's a really important thing that happened right around in 2007. And it's hard to think about 2007. I know, guys, like it's only 10 years ago. But in 2007, the hot phone was the Motorola Razr, right? That was 2007. In 2007, the hot smartphone was the Palm Centro. And then an important thing happened, right? The Google Android G1 was introduced, and the iPhone was introduced, and that's changed our lives. The reason it's changed our lives is that people are now spending upwards of 5 hours of their day actively on their smartphones. So smartphone, really good because they're connected to the internet. But the smartphone is also good at another thing, which is making phone calls. So it turns out in the last 3 years or so, we're at about 70% of our site traffic on mobile right now, right? I would challenge all of you, if you're on a commerce site, regardless of your conversion, your browsing traffic, majority of your browsing traffic is coming from mobile. And it turns out that being able to connect those two, because mobile sucks at conversion, being able to find people that are right at that point of conversion and saying, hey, you're at a point where you're about to try and do something super complex on a small screen while you're trying to read out a bunch of credit card numbers. How about we push you over to having a conversation with a great frontline, passionate representative who can talk you through the product and potentially make this process easier for you? And that's been phenomenal for us. I will say the one thing, I've been to a couple of call marketing conferences now in the last year. The one thing that it is critical is that we don't think of telesales as the telesales of the past. You have to think of telesales as a digital front line and manage that channel the way that you would manage any of your digital marketing channels. You've got to look at the data, you've got to look at the conversion, you've got to be able to look at it on a row-by-row level, and also do things like call monitoring, digital call transcription, and figure out what's working, what's not working, and use those utterances for personalization.
Right, because I would imagine it's an expensive channel to be relative to if they're converting on your mobile site or your mobile app.
Yeah, you definitely need to be sort of a fully integrated provider. Like I said, you've got 20,000 retail store employees. So it's not as cheap as digital because servers are kind of free right now. But it's less expensive than opening a brick-and-mortar store with the overhead of a brick-and-mortar store because you get overhead benefits from having them all in a call center. I will say these people are also extraordinarily aligned with what's happening on the website. It is really, really hard, you guys, to go take 20,000 employees across 3,000 stores and train them in the morning about what changed on the website yesterday and have them all be in sync, right? I've got, if you haven't met Rob already from Costco, they've got some of the similar problems. Large companies have this problem at scale, and almost every large company, you will find the retail store associates and the websites selling against each other. It's hard to keep the two in sync. Yeah. It's relatively easy to take a national call center, do morning training, do consistent methods and procedures, and keep those two channels aligned.
Yeah. So T-Mobile operates in a very competitive space, wireless carriers, mobile. What are you doing to differentiate yourselves versus some of those competitors that you're going head-to-head with?
Yeah, 5 years ago, I'd say, we were trying to compete in the wireless space. When our CEO, John Ledger, took the job, he's an old-school telecom guy, right? Worked at Global Crossing, worked at a bunch of companies, put on a suit every day, put on a tie, and went to work and thought about things as a regular telco. One of the things that he did when he first took the job was to do none of those, right? He didn't put on a suit and tie. He didn't spend a bunch of time in headquarters. He went out and talked to customers. He went out and talked to employees. And he asked them, why aren't you buying T-Mobile? What do you hate about wireless? What do you like about the other guys? And one of the things that it kind of turned out, everybody hated a telco. Nobody loves Comcast. Nobody loves Verizon. Nobody loves AT&T. Everybody hates these providers, and they have to live with them. So T-Mobile is founded on a basic principle of saying, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to try and poke you in the eye. How about we take a list of all of the things that you hate as customers about the category, that's broken about the industry, that comes from a place of arrogance from the industry, and just not do that. You hate signing contracts. Yeah, let's not do that. You have to wait 2 years for an upgrade. How about not doing that either? You got charged $2,000 because you wandered somewhere close to the Canadian border. None of that either, right? It's all of these things that you sort of look at as a commonplace consumer and say, that doesn't make any sense. This is just someone making a profit off of me. And it was a deliberate choice to go out there and say, there's a better way to make a profit, and it's siding with the customer.
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, and again, this kind of goes back to our discussion at dinner a little bit, was around kind of building the right team and the value of culture. So how would you describe sort of your leadership style and sort of what you're looking for when you're trying to find the right team members and kind of, like you said, find that right fit for T-Mobile?
It's a hard one. I struggle with the right talent profile in any given time, right? At one point, we might be hiring for infrastructure engineers. At one point, we might be hiring for data scientists to help with our personalization. At one point, we might be hiring for front-end developers. And it turns out that geeks are not all the same. They come in many flavors. Some of the geeks are very different from some of the other geeks. I'm a self-professed geek right here. It has become very clear to us, and I've been at T-Mobile for about 6 years, it's the longest job I've ever held in my life, that the one common factor of something that makes someone successful at T-Mobile is a focus on service. One of the things that we do on my team is we have a guy whose job it is to empathize with the customer. And he comes out and tells stories on Fridays. On Fridays, he comes out and tells a story of like, here's David. This is what we did to David. David ordered this product, and this is what happens. And he plays a call recording of David calling back with customer service. So we put ourselves in the shoes of the customer and say, it doesn't matter what your job is. If you're at headquarters and you never touch a customer, it's really important to understand the downstream actions of what you're looking for. So from my personal perspective, I call my management philosophy pull forward, because I don't know what we're going to invent in the next 3 months. The wireless industry moves really fast. I don't know what our agile roadmap is going to look like in the next 6 months. But it's important that my team sort of sees me committing to an uncertain future and standing on the other side of that chasm, right? So to use a mountaineering analogy, the mountaineer guy doesn't always stand at the bottom of the mountain. They go across the crevasse first. And they say, like, hey, look, this area is safe. I've put down the ladders. You come here, here, and here, and you won't fall down. The pull forward is really important. As a leader, you have to be on the other side of the crevasse and say, it's safe. You got to come over. But I really need you to come over, or else we're going to be stuck on this mountain. So.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this episode, be sure to visit our podcast channel page at www.mytotalretail.com/podcast for show notes. Total Retail Talks is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, but please remember to subscribe to our podcast channel page as well. Lastly, don't forget to connect with us on social on Twitter at MyTotalRetail and on Facebook at facebook.com/MyTotalRetail. Until next time, this has been Total Retail Talks.